Your mind plays tricks on you when you fall in love with a long-distance loner who says flat out they don't want a relationship. This is like an absent character. They're present only as an electronic voice or a digital image, but they're never a real person at your side, like living with you, going day to day with you from this experience to that experience. And this can be the perfect blank canvas for a limerent fantasy. If only we could be together, right? That's a limerent thought, never doing the math to understand that the person clearly, openly, strongly tells you that it will never happen. So who is avoidant here? My letter today is from a woman I'll call Sasha, and she writes, "Hello, Anna. I want your help to understand the situation I am in because I feel very confused about it and I can't make sense of it. I don't know if I'm deluding myself or if my intuition is right. So I've got the fairy pencil. I'm going to go in and circle some things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's see what's going on with Sasha here." So she says, "About 2 years ago, I met a man at an online school for self-development and healing from trauma. He had a dismissive, avoidant attachment style, while I had already done a lot of healing, and I considered myself now to have an earned, secure attachment style. I had learned a lot about the dismissive avoidant style. So dismissive avoidant is one of the attachment styles that is fundamentally insecure, but it avoids people, and it's a person who avoids intimacy, doesn't want to talk about promises, doesn't want to talk about feelings, doesn't want to commit. That's the tendency. And it's on a spectrum. And then dismissive is the part where they're just kind of dismissive about it. They're just like, well, too bad. I had learned a lot about this style because 2 of my previous partners had this issue, and I poured my heart to try to understand them and improve the relationships. The relationships still didn't work out, but I felt a great appreciation and care about the challenges and qualities of people with this kind of attachment style. I thought it could work well for me if I found a dismissive avoidant partner who was willing to heal and become securely attached." Uh-oh. Okay, I can see what's going to happen right there. We'll come back to it. "I was very attracted to this new man I met because he was so dedicated to his own healing. It seemed to have maximum priority in his life, and he said he wanted to overcome the intergenerational trauma from his family and become a good father and husband in the future. We became friends and started having regular video calls that went on for hours at a time. We talked about what we wanted in life, and the more I got to know him, the more I saw our values, goals, preferred lifestyle, how we wanted to raise our future children, all aligned very, very much. I could not believe someone like that actually existed, and that I could have found someone so compatible with my own values. However, we lived in different countries and different continents, but he does not live in his country of origin. He moved a few years ago and has only been living in that region he's in now for about 4 years. He's 32, I'm 39. After a few months, I told him I had romantic feelings for him, and I told him I thought we were very compatible. To my surprise, he said he was open to talking about us having a romantic relationship, when he had previously mentioned he didn't want long-distance relationships. But it seems he had assumed in his mind that I would be moving to be with him, but this was not possible for me due to health reasons, and I told him so. After that, he completely shut down the idea of us being partners and refused to consider moving himself, though I tried to come up with alternatives. He told me we could continue to be friends, and I accepted it. I really tried to move on from my romantic feelings for him and see him only as a friend." Well, that right there. Okay, we're going to come back to that. But it didn't work. Of course not. Over time, he started to invite me to video call more and more often until we were seeing each other every morning and evening almost every day, hours at a time. I left it up to him to initiate contact because he was the one who needed more space than me, and I could accommodate that. We built deep trust with each other over time and provided each other with a safe space to explore our feelings and be vulnerable. I held space for him. Okay, there's all these psychology terms here. They're a little disturbing to me. I'll tell you why in a minute. I held space for him for hours while he cried. He told me about his deepest traumas, and he felt safe enough to share in a way he never did with anyone else. He told me he never felt so understood and loved. When he saw me, he told me he felt great joy, and sometimes he even mentioned it felt like heaven. The way he looked at me and these things he said all indicated to me that he was in love with me, but whenever I mentioned it, he denied it and said he had already told me we could not be more than friends. But his pull toward me was very strong. We tried to put up boundaries and see each other less often, but then after a while, we ended back to seeing each other every day by his own initiative. I said yes because I felt so happy to spend time with him. I wanted it too. We had few conflicts because we understood, yeah, you wanted it, okay. We had few conflicts because we understood each other so well and we had compatible values. Well, like not at all actually, but okay. And when a conflict did arise, we used the tools we both had learned to overcome it relatively easily and quickly. I never knew a relationship could be so joyful and easy. Joyful and easy, it sounds miserable. You're getting your heart broken. We grew together and brought out the best in each other. I felt free to be myself with him. I felt accepted and loved for who I am, and he said he felt the same. I was everything he said he wanted in a partner, yet he didn't want me to be his partner. I was so confused. I'm so confused word. In 90% of the time when it shows up in these letters, it's denial. So we'll talk about this. He told me he never had a romantic relationship before and had only been in love once in his life with a woman who rejected him. They never dated. He was still grieving that after more than 3 years. He said before doing this healing work, he couldn't even imagine living with a partner because he needed his space and independence. Recently, the desire to have a partner and live with a partner had become very strong for him. After 1.5 years of this going back and forth, well, not really going back and forth, just going in one direction. Him pulling me close and telling me we should be only friends when I pointed it out to him that he was treating me as his girlfriend. I decided that it was best for us to go no contact and move on because I could not stand it anymore when he started talking about wanting to find a partner who was not me and potentially dating other women. It's been 6 months since we broke up our friendship and we've been in absolute no contact for 3 months. I still miss him every day, and I remember all the beautiful moments that we shared and how peaceful and joyful and safe I felt with him, right, except when you were miserable and longing and feeling confused and used. I still remember all the things he said that made me think he was in love with me and how he kept denying it. All right, we're going to come back to that after 1.5 years you had to try to imagine it, and because he never told you that, okay? And how he kept denying it. I can't understand how he could walk away from a relationship like this and imagine he can find another amazing relationship easily just because he wants a woman who lives close to him when it's not even his country of origin and he's only lived there for a few years. I've been looking all my life, working so hard to heal myself and to make relationships work, and I never found anything comparable to what I had with him. I don't think I will find it again. Being realistic, I tried meeting new men, but they were disappointing and behaved in unhealthy ways that I'm not willing to tolerate anymore. I decided to look for a new partner because it just feels like a waste of my time and energy. I need your help to give me perspective. Am I just deluding myself here, thinking he's in love with me? When I asked him to give me a list of reasons why he didn't want to be my partner because I was having difficulty moving on, he refused. He never gave me a straight answer and got triggered and defensive whenever I tried to talk about it. The only clear reason was the distance, but to me, that does not seem like reason enough to give up on the love of your life. This is an issue we could overcome if we work together, but he didn't want to. I just feel so confused and can't make any sense of this situation. How do I move on? How do I open myself up to love someone new again, even when this beautiful relationship that was more than I ever hoped for also didn't work out? It all just feels pointless and hopeless. I hope you can help me. And that is from Sasha. Okay, how sad that you think this relationship was more than you could ever hope for. I'm going to start right out by saying, girl, you need to hope for more. You need to hope for a physically present partner who is really into you and wants to be with you and says so. So I'm just going to set the bar there. That's what you didn't have. Anything less is not going to do. It's just not going to do. I know some people meet at a distance, and very quickly you can determine if this is going somewhere. And I know people who have successfully dated online for a while, and then one of them flies to see the other and gets an apartment nearby so they can spend some time. Like, it's a big deal to try to actually do courtship long distance. And so you have to be very serious about it. And both people have to completely have the same intention for it. And if it goes on longer than 6-8 weeks with no intention for that, it's not a thing. It's just not a thing. You know, we could probably spend more time unpacking it and figuring out what's what if people live in the same town and you're young and you have all the time in the world. So, Sasha, I just want to say one of the core misunderstandings you have here is that you thought he needed healing and you are already healed and you consider yourself to have a secure attachment style. And I would just say the writing's on the wall, my friend. You don't have that. You're attaching really hard to somebody who said over and over again, I'm not into you, and who was basically your emotional vampire, just using all your devotion to feed himself without giving you what obviously was called for in that type of relationship, of you giving him that. Now, I don't really want to talk about him being a bad guy. I want to talk about you being limerent on somebody and using all this psychological jargon to make it sound healthy and wonderful and gaslighting yourself that it's the most wonderful relationship ever. This is not a wonderful relationship. It's a vampire you signed up for. Okay, so you've been going to this program, and I just tell you, like, when I hear online school for personal development and trauma healing, like, that could be really good, but if people are trying to date in that environment, there's going to be a lot of people who have a lot of trauma. There's a lot of limerent, weird stuff that goes on in personal development gatherings of any kind, and online is like a double element where limerence and sort of deception and, you know, we can build people up into something they're not, that we would figure out very quickly if we saw them. You'd be able to feel because what was going on here is he was obviously very avoidant. Okay, fine. But you believing that, but if we would just work together, he would love me. That's whoops. Even people who are totally available, if they're not into you, it's not happening. That's the problem. I'm being very tough fairy with you because I'm trying to get through your idea that you're so healed and what's wrong with him that he doesn't see that you're the perfect match. So because you will give your entire life to somebody who tells you over and over again, I'm not into you in that way, and then you sit there and hold space for them, as you say, that is psychobabble for just sitting there being a sponge, a codependent sponge for somebody. Don't do that. He's not that for you. Or maybe he was, but I have some workarounds you can use so that this never happens again. So let me get to that. Let me just come through this stuff. The video calls were an hour at a time. Were hours at a time. They went on for hours, even though he said, I'm not interested in you in that way. And you're like, that's okay. I'll give you hours of my time every day at your disposal and on your schedule. Well, he doesn't seem like a great character for doing this to another person, but I just want to say, you kept signing up for it, and in your mind, you're just thinking, surely if I do this for him, he will love me, and if he keeps coming back for more, it means he's in love with me and wants to be with me. But you've got to listen to what people say, first of all. They say, look at what they do, not just what they say. But when it comes to saying, I'm really in love with you and I want to be with you, that doesn't work two ways. People have to be saying that for it to be true. They have to be saying it for it to be true. If they can't say it yet, they're not ready to say it yet. Because it's not something they're prepared to deal with or act on. But the fact that he went looking for another relationship is flat out evidence that he really wasn't kidding you. He wasn't interested in that. But he was happy to have a friend who would be like a free therapist for him. I'm very glad you outed yourself. You told him how you felt so that you could move the story forward and not just be stuck in a fantasy. And then you decided to be friends. So I used to have this kind of messy relationship in my life too. And it was a miserable many years that this went on. And it stopped 100% when I did a couple of things. And one of them was I did not stay friends in any relationship with a man where one of us had feelings and the other didn't. That's a myth that you can just carry on and revert to friendship on that. Maybe after 10 years, maybe after 20 years, but even then, who knows? It is not healthy. It's an avoidance strategy of your own, and that's kind of what I want to call you out on. You have become the perfect girlfriend for somebody who's totally avoidant. You're online, you're there for him, you adore him. He has to give nothing, no promises, and when he gets the whim, he can go for somebody else. It's like the perfect girlfriend. So I use a word here called crap fit, meaning we fit ourselves to crap, to unacceptable situations or unacceptable people. You like the person, but the situation was He just, he wasn't going to give it back to you. It was unrequited love that went on and on. And so you fit yourself to that by just, I saw the escalation of the psychological words, of this being a meaningful thing, but I don't see it as sparkly as you do. I see it as a very sad loss of your emotional energy, the great love that you have to give to somebody for the future that you want. And this thing where you had the same values, I would just say a core value that's totally, the number one value in a relationship is like, I want to be with you. I can be with you. I will move to be with you. You are the one I want to be with. So I don't know if you want to categorize that as a value, but it's the core one. It doesn't really matter what is like-minded when it comes to romantic feelings. When you have that feeling for somebody, it categorically changes the nature of the relationship. And then when you play along that you're their friend, it's basically, this is going to be hard, a strong word, but it's manipulation, thinking that if you just play along, they will come around, that you can sort of trick them into it. And even when they say it's not what they want. So, trying to push them into it is not really respecting them, if you can believe that. Like, I think that when we're in this situation, we feel exploited, but that's not really what's going on. Yes, he's using you, and he's taking advantage consciously or unconsciously of your willingness to basically put up with any dribble that he'll give you, any little crumb. So you had a few conflicts, you understood each other, you repaired things. So you got confused when he said he didn't want you as a partner. But that is an unequivocal statement. It's not a confusing statement. You got confused because you had this fantasy going at the same time that was overlaying the reality. And so it is hard, when you're in that's limerence, when it's very strong like that. Limerence is a infatuation or intense obsession with somebody that overrides reality. It can become like an addiction. So you weren't really in reality. You kept seeing love where there was no love. It was certainly a kind of love, but it wasn't the kind of love that you kept believing you were receiving. And he had never had a romantic relationship before. So at 32, that is a sign of great avoidance. He said before doing this healing work, he couldn't imagine it, but then he did want to do it, which is a perfectly reasonable goal for somebody who goes through a big program for healing trauma, is to become more open to a relationship. But you say after 1.5 years of this going back and forth, but the thing is, it just sounds like he never wavered on saying he didn't want a relationship. He just acted like somebody very close to you. But that's why I use the word vampire. It's a lovely energy when somebody adores you and thinks you're so amazing and, fits their schedule to you. You always have this companionship on your terms. And that's a vampire. A relationship is two-way. They show up for you. They're with you on your birthday. They care when you're sad. They drive you to the doctor if you're going to need a ride home. They're with you. It's a whole different thing. So he wasn't treating you as his girlfriend. It was like this other thing while he thought about finding a girlfriend. I could sure see why it felt like that for a long time, but I'm really proud of you for asking him directly and getting your answer, and then you just got stuck when you had the answer. So yeah, now you haven't had contact. Good move. That is what you do about a relationship like this. Still miss him. That's understandable. And you remember all the beautiful moments that you shared, how peaceful, joyful, and safe I felt with him. Okay, you're remembering some of the moments. What you're glossing over is the moments where you were in emotional agony, that he didn't return your love, that he was trying to meet another woman. It wasn't joyful. It was unfulfilling. It was sad. It was a slap in the face. That's the trouble with unrequited love. It feels awful. It feels good at first because it's a little bit of a respite as long as you have hope. But it turns into limerence, like toxic limerence. Limerence is always toxic, but it turns into that when hope becomes the dope. Hope is the addiction. I just know there's hope, and then we'll start to go, no, I hear hope in this. No, I think there was like a hidden meaning when he said he wasn't interested. And, no shame, because I just know you were neglected as a kid. This is what we do. This is what we do. We end up with a superpower to see love where there is no love. But in adulthood, this is a terrible way to go, and it blocked you from finding real love, like real actual love with somebody who loves you and is totally excited to be with you. You're saying you tried to meet new men, but they were disappointing and behaved in unhealthy ways. All right, so what's happening now is what happens to like most of us, and you're right at a precipice of your healing. And the question for you in your healing is, Can you get past this idea that men just accidentally show up as like unhealthy and unavailable? Or can you see that actually you are choosing them? You are falling for them, choosing them, investing your emotional energy in them. The alternative is you shut it down as soon as you realize it's not going anywhere, and you continue to date and see if you can find what will work for you. Now, what happens with trauma is we sort of lose this capacity to dream of our future. We just don't know what we want. And I ask people with trauma, like, well, what would be your ideal partner? And there is almost always a long silence. It's almost impossible to articulate, let alone envision what we want early in healing. So as much healing work as you've done in the relationship department, I think there's a ways to go here, happily. It doesn't have to be like this ever again. What you do is you set up knowing clearly what you need, somebody who can be with you, is into you, attracted, available, and then, maybe be pretty Victorian about friendships with men where you're online every day with them. They knew something in those days. You don't get your emotional energy all invested in somebody if they haven't sort of declared that they're interested in you. That goes for either gender. You need to know if somebody's interested in you. And occasionally relationships will come together mutually after one person was reticent at first, but usually not when the other person pursued them, for a year and a half. So that's usually not how it happens. So you have to use your discernment to actually just let go of people if they're not that. Make good friends, close friends with women. Make those your friends. So that those are the people to have safety and joy with. Men, because that's who you're attracted to, you gotta kind of treat them a little differently. And I totally believe you if you have some male friends, but good, stable friendships between men and women don't have this element in them. They can't withstand constant contact. It's gonna turn into what you're dealing with here and break down and have to go to no contact, which is good. I would encourage you, take your no contact further. I'm glad you wrote to me. If you want to use my daily practice so that twice a day you have a place to put all your angsty feelings about the memory of him and what you miss, that's a good thing to do. It's a very specific practice. It's a free course that's always available down in the description section or on my website at crappychildhoodfairy.com. And I lead free calls every 2 weeks to do the techniques together with anybody who wants to come and answer questions. This is what saved my life. This is what gradually got me out of the dysfunctional relationship patterns too. And so that I could marry a real guy who really loves me. And we've been married now for 10 years and together for almost 16. So that's a whole different thing from what I used to put myself through. So one last thing, you said that he refused to give you an answer about why he didn't want to be with you. And this is often the case, and certainly an avoidant is definitely not going to tell you, but I'll tell you what it was. For one reason or another, he wasn't into you. He didn't have romantic feelings for you. And when we don't have that for another person, no matter how wonderful they are, the relationship can't move forward. There it is. That's what it is. And people out of kindness or avoidance don't want to tell us, explicitly that that's the case. They don't feel it. That's what it is. And that is your answer. His actions are your answer. And his seeking a new woman to have a relationship with using you as his friend for that, which you said you were, is your answer completely. He does want a relationship, but just not with you. So the sooner you can just embrace that and go, okay, that's why it felt the way it felt, and you can start to let the lessons in. It's hard to face, but until you do, you're kind of destined to keep repeating this pattern. You can change this pattern, but you have to recognize the signs of limerence when it's happening. When someone is romantically obsessed with you, they usually will try to hide it, but make no mistake, you can feel it. And if you're not into them, it does not feel good. Limerence is the word for when a person is so infatuated with someone who isn't interested in them that it becomes like an addiction, very destructive for their life. And it takes them out of important things about real life, present time issues. But it's also harmful to the person who is the limerent object. And that's the word for a person someone else is limerent on. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Romy, and she writes, "Dear Crappy Childhood Fairy, I'm trying to salvage a very dear friendship. I've been friends with H for nearly a decade. All right, I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things. that I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's read all the way through Romy's letter and see what's going on. Okay. She says, while it started out with him being interested in me romantically, that never panned out. There is a bit of an age difference, and it started at a time when I was super avoidant. So I basically just ignored his increasing text messages until he quit contacting me. We run in the same social circles, so at some point we encountered each other out and about. I'm an extremely extroverted person, she says. My profession requires me to interact with a lot of people from different walks of life. I'm also very eclectic with my interests, so I find it easy to strike up a conversation with just about anyone. I guess this led to us conversing again and eventually forming a friendship with clear boundaries. Over the course of our friendship, I've been in dating relationships and some years ago began seeing my current significant other. H knows him. We've hung out together many times. I recently became engaged. My friendship with H was such. Maybe every 2 weeks or once a month, he might text and ask if I wanted to meet up with him and some other friends to go to a game, or if there was something going on in town, if I was going and wanted to catch up over a drink. Pretty standard logistical messages of who, what, when kind of stuff. I'm not saying the conversations never got deeper. Usually, how's work? How's the family? There were points where we both had family members experiencing a major health crisis, and we would discuss that. We don't touch. I'm not a touchy person to begin with, and as a woman with several male friends, I believe this can send the wrong signal. So, no hugs, no placing a hand on the shoulder or arm, etc. Over the course of the last 2 months, H has begun to text me with increasing frequency, and now it's always, I hope your day is going well, I hope work is less hectic for you, and random crap, I guess, just to get a response from me. This isn't the norm. He started to send me lengthy messages during working hours, and instead of every 2 weeks, it's every 2 days. He's continuing offering to help me with the major life events I have going on. Common form, yeah, we talk about that. With the major life events I have going on, and even so far as to offer to cancel his plans months from now to do so, and apologizing continuously for, well, just being, I guess. Some of it has been really manipulative. I think to get to see me and find out what I'm doing. Some of it has been downright bizarre. I started to feel really uncomfortable with him, which I hate. Some of my friends noticed and said they think he's in love with me. I started researching and found limerence, which I understand can be triggered by an engagement. I've decided to cut back on contact, try to make life as boring as possible, and limit in-person interaction. In retrospect, I think this has been going on longer than I realized. H used to tell me about women he was talking to. There's been none of that lately. Really, not much of what he's doing with friends either. Yeah, sounds like limerence. I really do not want H pining away for me, waiting for me to text him back or be available to spend time with him. He's a very good guy and deserves to enjoy his hobbies and find someone he can be with, even if I were not engaged. He and I are not compatible in any way. I'm a very independent person, and the constant texting is suffocating. We also have very different core values. I also hate to think that I'm overthinking this, that I found limerence in every interaction since is just confirmation bias. No, it's not. Am I way off base here? If I'm his limerent object, is there anything I can do to save the friendship? I feel like I'm hurting him no matter what I do, and I really do not want to hurt my friend. I should add, my fiancé knows all about what's going on. He's also worried H is going through something. Thanks for your time. All right, Romy, this is, I can help with this. There's a pretty clear-cut answer, and you probably dread it. I know you didn't want to hear it, but you're not being kind by allowing this relationship to continue. It seems like it because to you, this is a friend, he's a nice person. You can see he's just sort of going, tipping over into a bad direction here. But because this has been going on 10 years, it's really clear this is not going to get better. Like, given an opportunity to stay in contact with you, the limerent tendency will just keep activating. Now, if he wrote to me, which he hasn't, but if he did, I would tell him, you're not going to want to hear this, but you need to cut contact with this woman. She's She's your friend, she's been nice to you, but what you're doing here is cutting yourself off from the opportunity to find real love, and probably a lot of other things too. Limerence is like, it's almost like right up there with a hardcore drug addiction. It will keep your consciousness occupied, hijacked, always trying to get the next hit. And the hit for a person with limerence is hope. He's trying to get hope, like that he's going to see you, that somehow he'll think of the right way to tip his hand without tipping his hand, and you'll go, oh my gosh, I realized all along that it's you that I loved. And that is the hope of a limerent. But a limerent never actually comes right out and says, listen, I just have to tell you I'm in love with you, and before you marry this other guy, I just have to get this on the table. In limerence, people won't do that, and you know why? Because they already know the answer. They just can't face it. And so the hope, it feels like what's keeping them going. They feel that they need that hope, or life is just going to be too bleak. But that's how people feel about heroin when they're addicted to it. I just can't let it go. And letting go has a very painful transition phase, and then there's freedom. And then you know you can't go back to it. And I encourage people with limerence that's like dug in like this, it's not just a little thing for 2 weeks, that it's got to go. And also because you're getting married, even though your husband or your future husband, your fiance, seems to be supportive and caring about each party here, it is better for your marriage not to have entanglements with anybody who has feelings for you. That's just, it robs your emotional availability in ways that you can't necessarily see, but that can be felt, that nervous systems recognize. And that's one of the biggest things that people can do to clear up their emotional availability and make their light shine bright, their cab light, what I call the cab light. To be truly like, to feel like an available person is to end entanglements where one of you has attraction or desire to rekindle. And, some people want to keep those going because they're kind of fun and they're harmless, and I don't object, but if it's causing problems, I suspect your friend H here is, his life is quite empty. He said he doesn't even talk to women. He's pulling away from friends. It just sounds like a drug addiction, right? And in a way it is. It's getting a hit of hope that keeps it going. And it's sad. Limerence, I've heard there's a genetic component, but largely what I notice is it falls on people. It's a tendency in some people who were really emotionally neglected as kids. I see it a lot in kids of alcoholics, or kids who just didn't get paid attention to or cared for or guided. And so you get so good at seeing love where there is no love that you end up with some distorted perception in adulthood. You have too good of a imagination there that the signals that you're getting are secret code for, but it's you I really love. And so that's the hope. There's going to be a reciprocation. And, some people spend years in that space, and that's tragic. It's better to be sad for a while and move on and open up one's life to actual love. So that's the gift you can give him by ending contact. So here's what you do. I've had to do that a couple times with people. I've been on both ends of this. I've had it done to me. I've had to do it to others. And you just say, I need to end this friendship right now. I feel that there's a romantic energy, and that's not healthy for where I'm going in my life. And so thank you for being such a good friend all these years, but I can't spend time with you anymore. I wish you the best. So you break up with the friend. I know it sounds hard, but you'd be surprised how good it feels when it's done. Because what he's doing right now, let's be honest, it's uncomfortable for you. It's encroaching. It's invasive. Your intuition knows there's some sort of imaginary thing going on with you, and that feels creepy. So even good people do this, but it's not good for anybody. So I encourage you to end it as kindly as you can, and then open up your life to your marriage, and maybe do a little gut check on any other friendships with male friends that might be tinged with the sort of energy that is keeping anybody stuck. Some people are serial limerent objects, and that can sometimes be a sign of something else again, where, serial limerent objects love to inspire limerence in others and give them hope, but not deliver the goods, not actually be with them, because they feed off of it. So I don't hear you doing that, but just, for anybody listening, both parties can be harmed and go into a very negative state over this. It's better to have our relationships be clean and straightforward, no subterfuge, no secret agenda, honest feelings expressed. And I get it, in a new courtship or something, you don't have to run out and declare your feelings. That might be inappropriate. There's a time for everything, but 10 years into a friendship is well overdue. If you were emotionally neglected as a kid, you may be extra prone to direct your romantic energy toward people who are not with you. It's called limerence, and it's kind of an obsessive infatuation with people you cannot have. And it's a glitch in the way that we develop neurologically, and it can have terrible consequences for you and for the people who actually do love you. But our culture has a lot of fancy words and window dressing to make this addiction to escaping real life responsibilities through fantasy romance into something healthy and okay and justified. My letter today is from a man I'll call Carter, and he writes, "Hi, Anna. I'm a 35-year-old man, and I've been with my wife for about 15 years. Oh, I'm doing the math, okay. I've got my fairy pencil, and I'm going to circle things that I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's read through Carter's letter and see what's going on. All right, he says, when my 6-year-old son was born, I learned about male postpartum depression the hard way. In other words, I didn't know men could go through such an experience, and I was woefully unprepared for the mental barrage and pressures of becoming a father. Lots of things came up from my past, specifically around my relationship with my alcoholic father. While my relationship today with my father is very good, we had a very troubled relationship when I was a teenager and through my young adult life, and I don't think he'll ever fully understand the impact his alcoholism has had on me. During this period, shortly after my son was born, I had an emotional affair with a woman at work, to put it bluntly. I was depressed and in need of intimacy, and she told me things I wanted to hear. I hated becoming a father, but in the moment of weakness, she told me that I was more than that. Looking back, it was all very clear that she abused our friendship and crossed boundaries. Through marriage counseling and therapy, I discovered a lot about myself that I work on still today. Through this experience, I became very untrusting, as I felt ashamed that I was taken advantage of and acted out of character. I haven't had many friends, especially female friends, for many years since this. In fact, I actively avoided making friends and socializing. These days, things are great. My relationship with my wife is great, and I'm taking care of myself through healthy habits and therapy. I'm making friends, both male and female, and it's been rewarding. In addition, I've challenged myself to do better. I learned how to get over my fear of water and learned how to swim as an adult. It had so many parallels to life itself and opened my eyes to the life I want to live. In this vulnerable process, I became friends with my female instructor. Over the months, we've become close, and this leads us to today. I feel very strongly for this woman, so much so that I recognize this as limerence. I constantly think about her and have intruding thoughts. I only wish to be friends, but sometimes my mind takes over and I get really frustrated with the unwanted thoughts. When we're together, we have wonderfully friendly conversations and connect very deeply. In fact, I would say that our friendship is growing and is very normal. Through therapy, I've discovered that my need for friendship and connection outside of my marriage is very important to my mental well-being. My wife is also supportive of this, but I can't help but be distrusting of myself and others as I develop new close bonds, especially with women. My questions are, how can I put aside limerent thoughts and move forward in having a successful friendship with another woman? After what I've gone through, it sometimes seems impossible. I consider myself sensitive, but lately I've found that once I've let someone in my circle, they're in. I feel empowered to set boundaries and communicate effectively, yet my thoughts cause self-doubt. I'm not sure which I trust less, myself or other people. I fear losing friendships. I know this. It's painful to find someone new to love in a non-romantic way, because the idea of losing them is also painful. I fear that one day she'll find a romantic partner and ditch our friendship due to being incompatible. I know I can't predict the future, and so being present and enjoying what I have will allow me to live my life without fear. It's just easier said than done when the fear of what could happen is always there. Thank you for your time. I'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, Carter. Yes, you can have my thoughts. I'm really worried about you, Carter. You seem to be kind of dissociated. You seem to be talking a really good talk and walking a completely different walk. So I don't know if you're going to like what I have to say here. It's a bit of tough love, but let's go through what you told me. All right, 35 years old. You've been with your wife for 15 years, so you were 20 when you got together. That is very young. And you have a 6-year-old, so you would have been 29 when your kid was born. You learned about male postpartum depression. Okay, sometimes you use these concepts or psychology words, and maybe that's what it is, I don't know. But you got depressed when your son was born because you were freaked out about being a dad. Sometimes I think plain language would be a little bit easier to work with here than dressing it up as male postpartum depression. And then the other thing I notice you do is you deflect when you're kind of doing something that hurts other people. You deflect all of it onto other people. So I also had alcoholism in my parents, and I know what a big deal it is and how it affects stuff. So I do get what you're saying. You said that you were unprepared for the mental barrage and pressures of becoming a father, and this stuff about your own dad came up. That makes sense. Lots of things came up from the past, especially around relationship with alcoholic father. While my relationship today with my father is good, that's amazing. We had a very troubled relationship when I was a teenager and through my young adult life. And I don't think he'll ever fully understand the impact his alcoholism has had on me. Yeah, I think it's very rare that other people understand the way they hurt us, especially parents who let us down, and especially alcoholics. By the way, I've just noticed limerence tends to be linked. Almost everybody who writes in with limerence has an alcoholic parent. Not everybody, it's not a strict rule, but you fit the pattern. But for you to get better from this, it would be so important for you to bring the focus into your own behavior and thinking. Because I just keep hearing you being dissociated about it, and I'm really wondering about your therapist, who I can't help but wonder if that person is enabling you a bit with rhetoric. All right, so during this period shortly after my son was born, I had an emotional affair with a woman at work. You said, to put it bluntly, I was depressed and in need of intimacy, and she told me things I wanted to hear. And I'm not sure what you mean by sometimes when people say intimacy, they mean closeness, and sometimes they mean sex. And I know that, when a woman has a new baby, she may not be able to give you either one for a while because it's pretty intense. And so you say this other woman at work told you things you wanted to hear, and you hated becoming a father. Woo! You hated becoming a father. That's an alarming thing to say. I just kind of want to put a big circle around that. You hated becoming a father. That's very intense. And I guess you've talked about this with your wife and, the therapist, whatever, but your wife, that's so heavy. And I think that would be a very hard thing to hear, that the father of your child hated becoming a father. Don't let your kid ever hear that, okay? So yeah, you hated becoming a father, but in that moment of weakness, she told you that you were much more than that. Well, everybody is much more than a parent. I'm a parent, and I'm more than that too. I'm not really, I don't totally understand that. Maybe you're using euphemisms or something. I think you're saying you needed it validated, that she helped you see that you were also an attractive man, and not just whatever your negative idea of fathers is, that they're boring or not attractive, not sexy. I don't know. Looking back, you say it was all very clear that she abused our friendship and crossed boundaries. It sounds like you had a very mutual thing. I can't really tell. So she flirted with you. You were having an emotional affair with her. It takes two, and this is kind of what I'm talking about, where the dissociation, where you feel like other people did this to you. But as a person who has an extremely serious commitment of raising a small child together with your partner, you having an emotional affair at all, that's, you crossed the boundary. Like what she did, if she were writing to me, I'd be like, don't you even think of, flirting with some guy at work who's married. And if he has a kid, red alert, do not do that. That's a terrible transgression. And it threatens the marriage, and it threatens this, a marriage is kind of like a shaky thing enough, and a marriage with children, it's so important that the parents are able to parent that kid well and, not pass on the trauma to another generation. I realize not all marriages will last, but you don't go in and try to wreck somebody's marriage. So if this woman had asked me, I would have totally given her a piece of my mind. But you are equally responsible, even more so because you're the one who took a vow to your wife. So very, very important that you take responsibility for that. You shouldn't be hanging out with somebody who talks to you like that. And I urge you, try not to just displace all the responsibility for this. It's a pattern I'm kind of seeing here, and I think that you can turn this around if you can stop blaming other people for the places where you're crossing the line here. So through marriage counseling and therapy, I discovered a lot about myself that I still work on today. And through this experience, I became very untrusting as I felt ashamed that I was taken advantage of and acted out of character. So just in the spirit of tough love, I'm going to just say, were you taken advantage of? Or, did you just kind of become attracted to this transgression to feel like you were something more than whatever negative idea a dad is to you? You hated being a dad, you wanted something else. You say you acted out of character, and out of character is a funny phrase that we use because everything that we do is actually in character. Our character is complicated, right? It's complicated, and like most of the time we are the good people we like to present ourselves to be, but in reality sometimes we're not the good people that we like to present ourselves to be, and that's also part of our character. And it's kind of the part that most needs your attention, is the part of your character that crosses lines, that makes mistakes that could shatter everything. So it's a very important part of your character. So you said, I haven't had many friends, especially female friends, for many years since this. You say, I actively avoided making friends and socializing. So that's like, you felt traumatized by the experience, I think you're saying. These days, though, things are great. My relationship with my wife is great. I'm going to challenge you on that. I don't think it's great. I think it's great because she is in a lie. She's being lied to. She doesn't know that you actually are in love with another woman. So I would say your marriage is not great now. It's in great jeopardy. I'm going to call you on it, okay? You're telling yourself, it's great, everything's great. I'm taking care of myself through healthy habits and therapy and risking shattering your marriage. And I'm making friends, both male and female, and it's been rewarding. In addition, I've challenged myself to do better, and you learn to swim and overcome your fear of water. So in this vulnerable process, I became friends with my female instructor. Over the months, we've become close, and this leads to today. All right, you became close to your female swim instructor. No, well, here, you said later that you think it's a normal friendship. I don't at all think it's a normal friendship. It's normal for men and women to be friendly, especially in groups or couples or something, but if you're having one-on-one relationships where you're madly in love with the woman, it's not a friendship. So you said, I feel very strongly for this woman, so much that I recognize it's limerence. Limerence is this obsessive love for somebody you can't have. And limerence is an extremely dangerous and addictive fantasy state that can suck your soul. It can ruin your existing relationships. Like, this is very serious. It's not, I don't know, you seem dissociated from the seriousness of the situation. So I constantly think about her and have intruding thoughts. I only wish to be friends. Okay, this is where you're dissociated. I don't think you only wish to be friends. You constantly think about her and have intruding thoughts, presumably of desiring her. So I don't think you wish to be friends. That's like this other story you tell maybe to the world. You said, but sometimes my mind takes over and I get really frustrated with the unwanted thoughts. So your mind your mind is you. Your mind is you. You are the person who has those thoughts. It's not overtaking the good you. This is all you. The part of you who's trying to be faithful, who's trying to, live life in a way that you feel you can present to the world and feel proud of. And then also you is the one who's just totally, at the edge of a cliff right now. So when we're together, we have wonderfully friendly conversations and connect very deeply. All right, for that very deep connection, this is more like the red alert is going off. And you said, I would say that our friendship is growing and is very normal. And I'm just like, no, that's not a friendship. It's not normal. And if it's growing, I think your marriage is in grave danger. Okay, you're writing to me about this. So some part of you knows this, but you seem to be dissociated from yourself. So through therapy, this therapy comes up a lot. And whenever you're talking about therapy, this is like the good talk that you do about this stuff. So I don't know if your therapist is sort of validating that this is normal, and that's possible. I think that, you can find all kinds of therapists, and some of them will validate polyamory or, very, very permissive sexual mores. So if that's where you and your wife have agreed it's a good place for the marriage to go, then that would be one thing. But from what it sounds like, no, it's not. You went through a lot of depression about what happened before. It shattered your confidence for years. How is this different? I don't know. Maybe because it hasn't broken down yet, or your wife hasn't found out yet, or you didn't get left yet. I don't know. You haven't said. There's this weird sunshine thing here that is flitting through a very dark story. So through therapy, I've discovered that my need for friendship and connection outside my marriage is very important to my mental well-being. Sure, but probably not being very close to women you can't stop thinking about. My wife is also very supportive of this. No, she's not. But I can't help but be distrusting of myself and others as I develop new close bonds, especially with women. My questions are, how can I put aside limerent thoughts and move forward in having a successful friendship with another woman? I have bad news for you, Carter. You can't. You can't. Once you're limerent, this is a addictive state. There's an aspect of delusion to it. It's something that you can't have. It's not a normal friendship. And if it's gone on as long as it has here, to the point that you're writing to Crappy Childhood Fairy, you already have your answer. Like, it's not a friendship. And very few people who get limerent can just sort of snap out of it and have a normal friendship. One test that I would give to you is if you were totally honest about your feelings for this woman and that you can't stop thinking about her, you have intrusive thoughts, and you're limerent for her, and you want to be friends with her. Does she have a problem with that? If you can't be honest about what's really going on, well, there it is. A toxic relationship is one that you have to lie about to the person who trusts you the most, to a person who with you is raising a little child and is counting on you pretty heavily right now, who I assume would be devastated to find out what your thought process is. Limerence is an escape. Let me cut to the chase here. Limerence is an escape from reality. So I think you're still maybe resisting the responsibility of being a dad and the responsibility and commitment of being in your marriage. Now, people do leave marriages and split custody or, have less than full custody. And that could be where you go with this, so that you're free to be friends, as you say, with other women, very close friends, in a way that doesn't threaten your marriage and that basically leaves you free to have sex with them if that's what you want, or fall in love or have a relationship. I feel like that's where you kind of want permission to go. But I don't think that's the agreement you have with your wife. And I wouldn't recommend it, especially like you as a kid of an alcoholic. So for those of us who grew up with alcoholics, like actually being close to people and making commitments has a strange, uncomfortable, alien, imprisoning feel for it sometimes. I know what you're talking about. I had kids later than you, so maybe I had more time to adjust. And I was single a lot longer than you, so I had time to adjust, and I had time to really want it. So that may be why by the time I had kids, I never had any doubt about it. But lots of people do. It's not like everybody has to do the Hallmark card version of it's the best thing that ever happened. And not every person feels like that. It is a struggle for people. So there is a way out if that's what you really want. But if you want to stay in, I'm going to talk to you, assuming what you actually want is to stay married. You got to cut off all contact with limerent, people for whom you're limerent. It's an addiction. It's sort of like heroin. And if somebody were doing heroin, it just wouldn't be possible for them to keep doing heroin. And could I just get to where I could use it normally, just a little bit at a time? Or could I just hang out with all the people who use heroin while they're on heroin and not use it myself? It's just not like that. It's one of those things that once it's got hold of your mind, it can be very, very hard to shake loose. And if you're serious about shaking it loose, you have to do every single thing possible. So first you break off contact, then you stop thinking about them. You don't write letters about them. I use the daily practice. The daily practice is where you can pour every single thought. We write the fearful and resentful thoughts. I have fear I'm never going to see this person again. Fear they were the only person I can ever love. Fear they're the only person I understand or ever want. Fear I don't want to do what I'm doing in my life. So all this stuff goes on paper. If you want to learn that technique, it's always down in the description section. I have a free course. I talk about it a lot. People who watch my videos have heard about it many times, or they're already doing it. Like thousands of people do it. But it's a way you can get free of the thoughts that bother you and get back to your real self. If your real self wants to be married and parent and raise your son, you got to just get away from this woman. This is a very dangerous situation for you. So you said, I consider myself sensitive, but lately I've found that once I've let someone in my circle, they're in. Well, that's not true. We can break up with people. You can too. You don't have to make a big speech about it. You can just say, I've had a great time talking to you, but I think this is not going to work for my life. So see you later. You can learn swimming from somebody else. You say, I feel empowered to set boundaries and communicate effectively, yet my thoughts cause self-doubt. This is like, I feel empowered, the word empowered, boundaries, communicate effectively. It all sounds like happy talk to me because actually you're in danger, not like danger is the opposite of empowered, I think. Setting boundaries that you're in love with somebody who you are not supposed to be in love with, and communicating effectively. I assume you're not telling the woman how you feel about her and you're not telling your wife. So that's what I mean. I just think that's like this front you're putting up. And then you say, but my thoughts cause self-doubt. It's not two different people. These are your thoughts. This is the way you present yourself and the way you actually think and feel. And you present yourself in the good way because you don't want people to leave or freak out. And I understand that. And you get to that where I fear losing friendships. I know this. It's painful to find someone new to love in a non-romantic way. So it's a little weird, like I love her, but in a non-romantic way. I'm not buying it. You love her in a romantic way, or this wouldn't be an issue. And when you make friends with people outside your marriage, I don't know. I have like really good long-standing friends and I love them. And some of them are men and none of them are a threat to my marriage. And I hang out with them a lot, mostly in the companionship, like with my husband present, sometimes not. Some of my women friends I see on my own. Some of my closest friends are the people I work with in Crappy Childhood Fairy too, and I hang out with them. And I love each of my friends. When a friendship ends, sure, it's sad, but it's totally different than a romantic ending. It's not like, it's different. And I'm just hearing, I don't know, I think you're trying to pretend this is a friendship. So you say you fear that one day the swim instructor woman will find a romantic partner and ditch our friendship due to being incompatible. So my dude, that's love and jealousy. That's not friendship. So my friends, I really hope that they find love. I'm so excited for them to find love. I'm not threatened when they do. That's what a friend is. A friend is somebody, your friends want the very best for you and they want the best for you. So if she were to find a romantic partner, that would be really great. So that's how I know you're kind of lying to yourself about the nature of this. You said, I know I can't predict the future, and so being present and enjoying what I have will allow me to live my life without fear. I don't know, that sounds like a bunch of words. I don't really know what that means. I think that the fear you have is because of romantic attachment. It's just easier said than done when the fear of what could happen is always there. Yeah. So you wanted my thoughts, and I those were pretty harsh, I know. But I think your marriage is in grave danger, and if you want to save it, I encourage you to take my advice and stop all contact with this limerent person. And the therapy sounds like it could be helpful to you, but I'm really questioning why your therapist hasn't called you out on this yet. Once in a while, I get a letter seeking my advice that's so serious that I'm not sure I should even read it on YouTube. Usually I decline, but in the case of a letter I received just a few days ago, I couldn't stop thinking about the danger that everyone is in and thought I'd better tell the letter writer, who asked me to be as harsh as I needed to be, the urgent truth. So here goes. I'll call this man Mitchell, and this is what he told me. Hi, my story of limerence is long and painful. I'm 37 years old, and this has been going on since I was 13 or so. I understand limerence quite well. I've read the literature, the videos, therapists, lifestyle changes, medication. I've been through it all. I'm hoping you've got some perspective for me, harsh or otherwise. All right, I've got the fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things I want to come back to, and let's go through and I'll share with you what's going on in his life. My childhood featured an alcoholic father, an overbearing and nagging mother, and a whole lot of fighting. My parents would often just put me between them. I'd be forced to be the peacekeeper as young as 8 or 9. I remember being terrified of feeling my parents weren't in control, like I was the adult. I learned to become whatever the situation called for. I used to think of myself as a chameleon, able to shift to keep the waters calm. My mantra during the fighting was to tell myself, I'm a rock. I do not feel, as if I did, one of them would use it as fuel. They'd play me off each other constantly, and Dad says, don't tell Mom about the drinking. Mom knows he's been drinking and asked me to confirm. I became what my therapist described as a master compartmentalizer before the age of 10. I have a strong urge to help people. I've always felt that the only way people will accept me is if I'm doing something for them. Fast forward to my 20s. I'm hyper independent. I moved out as soon as possible, and I put myself through university, got a dream job, moved to the city, all that stuff I thought would fix me as a kid. I just kept my nose down. I met a girl. She was beautiful, smart, sweet, everything I could have hoped for, and she loved me. I don't think I ever really stopped to think if I ever truly loved her the way she loved me. I felt a combination of guilt, safety, and security with her. She had a few issues, and I showed her how to become independent and strong. We got married and had a child, and things were good. The child turned out to be severely disabled. I knew early on and exhausted all my resources to try and fix the problem that wasn't really fixable. I was destroyed. I felt it was somehow my fault. I felt like someone kicked me in the chest for a solid year. My child was obsessed with long car rides by the age of 2, and I didn't mind as it gave my wife a break from a challenging situation. That's when it happened. I saw a girl on the side of the road in danger. She was laying down and not moving. I called from the car to see if she needed help. She didn't move. I swooped in like the foolish rescuer I am and got involved. Called 911 and performed rescue breathing to reverse her overdose. She was homeless, badly mentally ill, and a drug addict, but I literally saved her life. I looked for her until I found her again. And she remembered me, and she was so sweet. I'll never forget the glimmer. It made me feel things I'd never felt. I've read that limerence is charged by drama, uncertainty, etc. This girl had it all. I'd start seeking her out on my drives. I didn't know why, but she was a magnet for me. I was hooked badly. She pressed every button in me. I didn't stand a chance. She took me to places I'd never dreamed I'd go over the course of the next 3 years. I won't get into specifics, but I've learned to navigate the mental health system, the legal system, the streets, and everything between for her. I'll never forget when I eventually found myself in a crack house. My number painted on the wall. I made a deal with a decent guy that ran this flop house. He wouldn't let anyone exploit her. In exchange, I'd help him with some personal goals. He was really into things I did professionally. I never did the drugs. I used to say she was addicted to drugs, and I was addicted to her. I fought hard. I told my wife early on, and she was incredibly supportive. I'd often get the girl admitted to the hospital for care, partly to give myself a break, and because she needed to. She'd go off the rails after a few days of drug use by this point and become extremely vulnerable. She spent almost all her time calling me and trying to find me. When I changed my number, she just kept going to the places I frequented, asking for me. She overdosed and died eventually. I was devastated, but within a week, I felt a sense of relief like none other. I got very lucky to get out. I still think it was a gift. All right. My marriage was never really the same. I simply did too much damage. There was love, but I think deep down we both knew that splitting up would badly hurt our son, who required massive support, both in daily life and financially. We moved past as best we could. I took the advice that seemed best. I started my own business, set and met lofty goals. Things between my wife and I were just fine. I had largely resigned myself to a life of relative loneliness and servitude. I wanted to do the right thing. Leaving my family at this point to try and seek happiness wasn't something I felt capable of doing. When I was growing up, I learned to be selfish because I had to entirely rely on myself, but leaving the marriage was a line I wouldn't cross. I learned to never go down to that part again. But one day I was in a store and I saw a young girl getting cornered by security. I witnessed them toss her out for some personal hygiene items she was trying to steal. I bought the items and found her outside. She was so nice, hugged me, and told me her name, and it was over before I knew what I had even done. It all came back and I knew it at that moment. I tried to put it out of my mind, but my son wanted his car rides and I had a new limerent object. A limerent object, by the way, is the person where you direct limerence. Limerence is an addictive obsession with another person that is so strong, even though it's not possible to be together, it's so strong it just destroys everything else in your life and it destroys your availability for real love. So this would be the right word for this, but this is an extreme case. It's been about 4 months. I've become her entire support system. My wife doesn't know. It was manageable until she started to become limerent for me. I fueled the fire. She has nobody except me. She views me as her boyfriend and has largely reduced her substance use and moved back in with an old relative to try and reclaim her life. She tells me she's falling for me. I wanted her to be using me, but I can't deny that I've injected myself into her life and made myself her limerent object. She doesn't know it, but I know the signs. She's registered for treatment. All she talks about is getting sober so we can be together for real. I know this isn't real. The addiction is strong for me as well. I'm feeling extremely guilty as I know if I pull away now, she's going to be even more doomed. I tried to speed run the limerence. When she wanted things to become physical, I didn't stop it. I told myself if I just go through the stages, I'll be out faster. I'm already starting to feel deterioration. She's still in there, but I'm trying to be very clinical in how I get through this. I never expected it to be reciprocated. I even put myself into a position to be rejected so she'd crush me and I could try to move on. It backfired badly. She's just starting to really ramp up now. I don't know how to get out of this in one piece without someone dying. If I end up actually with her, it'll be the end of me. And if I try to stop now, she will definitely die. I know it sounds like an excuse, but I put myself into a position in her life without thinking of the full consequences of my actions, should they be effective. I don't want to abandon her, but I know I must. I'm the only male figure she's ever had that was positive for her. She's been badly abused by the worst kind of men, and I broke down her walls and forced myself in. It's not much different than the first girl, except this one isn't fully gone yet. She's close, but has hope, and I'm about to smash it to bits, if I can even muster the courage. I don't really know how to live life like this. Even if I get past this one, I'll be back to where I started, except this time I've exhausted my purposeful living ideas. I've got a business that's successful that I'll lose if I leave. My large home is key to my business. Rent is very unaffordable where I live. Everyone will suffer greatly all around. Things are very stable for my son right now, but if I were to leave, it would upend him in the worst way. All right, Mitchell. Okay, I'm going to respond to this. So I would say this is an emergency. This is an emergency situation for you. Let me go through what you told me. So you had this rough past, and I get it. Like basically all the letters I ever receive are from people who had these rough pasts. So I understand. I know it played a role. I don't think we need to dwell on it much. It's not relevant right now. The crisis is you in present time, all right? This thing where it's like, oh, you always felt you could fix people. I'm going to ask you to forget that thought. That sounds like a rationalization. Maybe it was your pattern. Who knows? It doesn't matter what your pattern has ever been. It doesn't matter how you got that way, because that information is not useful here to correcting the situation before somebody is terribly hurt. All right. My child was a severely disabled kid. That is so rough, and I'm sorry. And this thing where your wife loves you and she's great, but you're not sure you love her. Well, it sounds like you have a bit of avoidance there right now because you have a severely disabled child. Trying to have like the ultimate great love in your marriage is a luxury fantasy right now. Most marriages are about practical day-to-day love, and that's what you have. And I'm going to just really say so strongly, do not F it up. Do not F it up. So you have a good marriage. You have somebody who's there with you, and you guys are dealing with the hand of cards you've been dealt, which is a severely disabled kid who needs you. And there it is. So the car rides is what worked. All right, yeah, all right, I get it. Your kid needs car rides, but that is no reason for you to be sniffing around where this obsession you have with broken bird girls is. I'm going to get to the tough love with what you're going to need to do, but those days are over. You can't use your kid as an excuse to be out there doing that. You can't be doing this in front of your kid. You can't be doing this as the father of this kid, and you can't be doing this to your wife, and you can't be doing it to these poor women who are so fragile. So let me get to that. All right. So when you saw this girl not moving on the side of the road, I don't think it was foolish to stop and call 911 and do rescue breathing to reverse the overdose. You did save her life, and that was the right thing to do. Then you found out how vulnerable you are. So I'll tell you something. It's a pattern sometimes for men. And this is, men and women have mostly common symptoms, but here's the thing that happens to men sometimes when they become fathers, is they freak out and they do something extremely drastic. They go through some personal transformation that makes them impossible for their partner to stay with, and everything is ruined. And you are doing that right now. And it's an impulse, it's an immature impulse. It might be trauma driven, but it doesn't matter what causes it. You don't get to do it right now, okay? You just don't get to do this. And so you develop limerence, you can remember the glimmer, you could feel it. I think you have very clear eyes that this is an addiction and it's sick and it's unhealthy, but there's something I don't think you're seeing very well. Now, I've been dragged down by relationships before, and I understand what's going on here. And these are pretty severe markers of going down where, you're having to navigate the legal system, mental health system, streets, and then eventually be in a crack house trying to make a deal with the proprietor to trade help for her. So, yeah, okay, I can understand your motives here, but it's you knew for a long time that this was sick for you. This is not a healthy thing. This is not something you and your wife are doing together. It's like your private thing, using your kid as a prop to justify it. So, yeah, she was addicted to drugs, you were addicted to her, and there you are. You're an addict. That's what it is. You are an addict. And you say, I fought hard, and you told your wife, and she was incredibly supportive. And I just had to circle that. I'm like, why? Why would she be supportive about you being obsessed with a woman who's a drug addict? I would be very alarmed by something like that. So you didn't tell me much about that. I'm just going to assume that she had some sort of good faith in the beginning. And if she found out what's really going on now, she would not. This would be terrible, absolutely destructive to her. So you'd get the girl admitted to the hospital just to not deal with her. You managed to cut off contact, block her. She'd look for you. And then when she died, and I've had that happen too. I've had I've had 2 partners die of drugs, of overdoses. And I was also devastated, and I was also incredibly relieved at the end of it because I wasn't able to get out myself. So I do understand. You were lucky to get out. It's a shame that it had to be that way, but but we don't have to link your story with her story. Her story was she was going where she was going, and you got sidetracked and you got set free to stay with your family and show up for them as they depend on you to do. So your marriage was damaged. And so that's what I don't understand. You say that was too much damage, but your wife was supportive. So I don't really understand what that is. Is she just codependent and thinks she has to be nice? Is she terrified that you're going to leave and she has to put up with any amount of, we call that crap fitting, when you fit yourself to an unacceptable situation or person? I don't know, but it is unacceptable, whether she knows it or not. And you did the best you could. You moved past it. You started a business. So you did all these outward signs, but there was not healing in yourself. You got an escape from that situation, but you didn't heal. You knew that you couldn't leave the marriage, and I'm glad you didn't. And then you wouldn't go to that part of the town, but then your son wanted the ride, and that's you're bullshitting, right? Like, if you really have to drive your car, you don't have to go there. And with so much at stake, I want you to just cut the bullshit. Just cut it out. This has nothing to do with your son's need for rides. This is your addiction. So you helped a girl who got busted shoplifting, and then you rescued her. And then next thing you know, now here's where you're going into magical thinking, where you say, I've become her whole support system. I'm the only positive man in her life. So here's why I'm going to give you the tough love. You're a terrible man in her life. You're married. You have a kid. You have an addiction. Addicted love is not real love. You're not going to be with her no matter how this plays out. This is not the real thing. You have something very, very hurt and destructive inside you that must be healed. Everything you do out of this addiction hurts people, including her. You're not. So I just, you asked me to be harsh, and I think this is what you needed me to say. You're not the good guy you imagine yourself to be. You're not saving anybody. You're injecting yourself. You're creating a false dependency on them. And while that's real, that is no excuse to continue another day in this relationship. So maybe you want to call a crisis center and tell them the situation, or call a doctor or therapist or homeless shelter. But I'm going to ask you, Mitchell, please never have contact with her again. And if you want the doctor or the therapist or the social worker or the crisis center to pass this message that you can't have contact again and send her your good wishes, do that. But please do not use anything as an excuse to keep this terrible situation alive. Everything that you do is poison right now. Stop the poison. Stop the contact. You haven't told your wife yet, and I don't know if you should. I'm going to say that you really need to be with a professional helper on this, a therapist, a specialist in sex and love addiction. And also, I'm going to put it out there is a program called Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, also Sex Addicts Anonymous for men, and you need to be in a men's-only program. And I'm going to really lay down the law here and say you should not go to meetings that are mixed gender. You should not be, everybody in a 12-step meeting is a broken bird. So you should not, you need to dry out, my friend, dry out, and be away from damaged women and be away from any kind of temptation while you start to get really, really honest with people who care about you and who get it about what's been going on. I think you are in danger as a person, spiritually, but also this is what really can take people down to the edge of survival. And I'm just going to caution you so strongly, go get help. Go get help. Now, here's the thing. You need to be discerning. You need to simultaneously be the person who's suffering and the person who's looking at the suffering you and making better decisions. Because if you want to, you can find a therapist who will enable you to keep doing this, who will just sit there and talk in circles with you about your feelings about it, rather than to get in there with the moral emergency that this is and the survival emergency that it is for your family, for your wife and your child, for the woman involved, and for you. So this is an emergency. And so please stay away from any helpers who don't see it as that and who will enable you to keep going. You will always find people who will enable you about this. You can go to a bar and get drunk with some guys and say, my wife, my kid, it's such a burden I have. And you can get people to enable you any time you want to. But you're going to have to be strong and refuse to do that. Do not get enabled. Get with the people who will help you be strong and draw the line on this. So yeah, this dream of like perfect marriage, oh yes, it just hurts. It hurts to know that it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be a perfect child. Your child has a disability. I don't know what it is. I'm guessing it's something that takes a huge amount of care. And this is one of the things that a lot of families of disabled kids struggle with, perhaps with severely autistic kids. There are a lot of conditions that could be like that. And you know what helps them? To be in support groups with other parents who do that. And I know people who do this. They have close fellowship and family friendships with other parents who are going through this and other kids, and they work together to advocate in schools and from their counties to get the care they need. And this is what's happened. Life is not just like we get to drive off and have no problems. Life has problems, and life has beautiful things in it, and the problems and the beautiful things are linked together. And I know that having a disabled kid is a hard thing. I know it's a hard thing, but it's also this incredible opportunity for you as a person to come out of this, I'm going to call it, this selfish desire to, have this, to be this like rescuer, to save somebody, to just run away from it all, and to stay and show up and be there for the people whose lives you have committed to honor your commitment to them. And it's one thing when parents get divorced, when the kids are easy and don't need a lot of care, it's still destructive. But where this is right now, where it probably takes one parent home full time, please don't do that. Please stay and give your love and your efforts and your fatherly and husbandly energy to these two people who totally deserve your ongoing commitment and who will benefit tremendously because you can give that to them, and who will suffer horribly if you don't. So with a therapist, decide what your wife needs to know. I'm not going to try to take that on, when I don't really know you or enough about the situation, but I'm going to call out the emergency for what it is. I would let go of this idea that this girl's life depends on you continuing to be there as this fake boyfriend, this tormented soul who's in there ruining his whole life and really lying about his emotional availability for her. I've gone ahead and blown this video by saying bullshit again and again, but it's bullshit, all right? You're not good for her. I like the idea of you contacting a professional who will know what's going on and communicate your farewell to her. But no contact is how we do this. No contact. And if you're ready to take that seriously, go get that professional help. Check in with Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous and get immediately with people who you can tell the truth to, who will help you make strong, good, caring, loving, wise, human, responsible decisions about this. All right? I send you my love. I invite everybody in the comments. Please don't criticize. Please give your support and love to Mitchell, who needs it right now.